New question, the member from Toronto, Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question to the Premier. Last week's release of the Premier's long-delayed long-term energy plan confirmed what the NDP has been saying since March. The Premier is forcing ratepayers to take out a massive payday loan to artificially and temporarily lower bills before the election. After the election, the bills of Ontario families will rise even higher and faster because they have to pay back an extra $40 billion in interest and principal. But even I was surprised by the sharp rise in hydro rates for industrial consumers, which the Premier had excluded from her $40 billion borrowing scheme. Will the Premier explain why, under her plan, northern industrial hydro rates will rise almost 40% between 2019 and 2025?
Thank you. Premier.
Minister of Energy.
Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is important for us to continue to talk about the long-term energy plan, the Fair Hydro plan, and of course, Mr. Speaker, large industrial consumers. We recognize the importance of electricity prices for businesses, and this is reflected in many government programs that help businesses make electricity more affordable, such as the ICI program, Save on Energy for Business, Industrial Electricity Incentive, Mr. Speaker, the Northern Industrial Electricity Rate Program, and the Industrial Accelerator Program, just to name a few. As well, Mr. Speaker, the long-term energy plan, the 2017 long-term energy price plan outlook for industrial consumers reflects average increase in line with inflation, Mr. Speaker, in line with inflation going through right until the end of this long-term energy plan, Mr. Speaker. So, you know what, this plan is working for our large industrials, and will continue to offer these programs to help to lower their rates even more.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Speaker. And again to the Premier. Under the Premier's hydro plan, rates for manufacturers, automakers, steel mills and other large power consumers will rise by 30% in just 6 years. Northern industrial customers will be hit even harder. Their rates will rise almost 40%. Instead of getting private profits off hydro bills and bringing Hydro One back under public ownership, the Premier is putting even higher burdens on Ontario's manufacturing sector and northern industries. Will the Premier tell us how many industrial jobs will be lost because of her privatization plan for our hydro system?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're continuing to see job growth in our industry, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the leadership of the Minister of Economic Development and Growth and the Premier, Mr. Speaker. We also have just said to him momentarily that the long-term energy plan price outlook for our large industry reflects an average increase in the line with inflation. It's also important to say, Mr. Speaker, that the electricity price for electricity or industrial electricity consumers in Ontario is lower than the average price in the Great Lake region, as reported, Mr. Speaker, by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Rates in Ontario remain competitive with other Canadian.
The member from Prince Edward Hastings is warned. The Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation is warned. Any other smart aleck remarks? Finish, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let's be clear, rates in Ontario remain competitive with other Canadian and American jurisdictions, with prices in Northern Ontario, in particular, among the 5 most affordable jurisdictions on the continent, Mr. Speaker. And that's thanks to the Northern Ontario Industrial Electricity Rate Protection Program, Mr. Speaker, something that we continue to work with all of our northern industries on. Mr. Speaker, we're working for all consumers, large and small, in this province. Thank you, Mr.